Okay, students, we've just finished talking about how to solve an equation using addition. Now we're going to talk about how to solve a linear system using subtraction. These problems are specifically 7 through 12. Let's go over the steps, and they're going to change a little bit. We talked about the additive inverse and how we use the additive inverse to get a variable to drop out of equation. So if the additive inverse is working, we can just go ahead and add them together. You can see where we're adding together. But if it's broken, if you look right here on problems number 9 and 10, you can see here I have a -4 and a -4. So if I add those together, it gives me a -8. The y's don't drop out. If I look here, I have a -2y and a -2y. So the same thing as with number 10. Because the additive inverse is not there, the y's will not drop out. And I have to at least get one variable to drop out. This means that the idea is if the additive inverse is broken, where it's not working, you have to change the sign in the second equation, and then we're going to go ahead and add them together. Now let's look at this and see exactly what it means. I'm going to go ahead and write the first equation down. I've got 6x subtract 4y equals 10. Now do you see the additive inverse isn't there? This means I have to change the sign of everything. I want this to be a +4, and if I change that to a +4, I've changed the sign of it, so I have to change the sign everywhere else. So 4y changed to a -4y changed to a positive, +13 changes to a negative, and a +5x changed to a -5x. This allows me to go ahead and add them now, and that will give me 1x. The y's go to 0, and I get -3. So x equals a -3. Now remember the step. After finding the first variable, put its value into the first equation. We know what the first equation is. We know the value for x. That means I'll change all the x's in the first equation. I'll change it to a -3. We'll take 6 times a -3. I have the 4y equals 10. I'll go ahead and that gives me a -18 minus 4y equals 10. I'll add 18 to each side. That gets the number to go to 0. I'll add 18 to the right hand side. Now I have a -4y equals 28. Divide each side by a -4, so be careful of your sign. And I end up getting y equals a -7. X equals a -3, and then y equals a -7. And I think we need to write these as ordered pair. Remember, the x goes first and the y second. Now we'll go ahead and check this to make sure that we've got the right answer. It only takes a minute to do it. Remember that when you put a variable in using your calculator, you want to put it in parentheses to signify that this is what you've substituted in. My y value is a -7, and if I have the right answer, it should be 10. That checks out on the first equation. Now I have to check it for the second equation. 5 times a -3 and a -4 times a -7. It should give me 13, and I get 13. That is the solution to this. Now remember, if you were to graph these two equations by making a table, putting them in slope-intercept form, making a table, and then graphing that table, these two equations would intersect at that point right there. I'm just going to do it right here. The first equation is a -2x minus 2y equals 20. I'll change the sign of everything in the second equation. That positive x will become a negative x. That negative 2y will be a positive 2y. And that 17 will become a negative 17. I'll go ahead and add the equations together. That will give me a negative 3x. That goes to 0, and this becomes a negative 3. A negative 3x equals a negative 3. Oh, that's not a negative 3. That should be a positive 3. And that will give me x equals a negative 1. Now we go back to the first equation. We're going to put a negative 1 for every place where we see an x. Negative 2, negative 1, minus 2y equals 20. That will give me a 2 minus 2y equals 20. I'll subtract 2 from each side. That will give me a negative 2y equals 18. Divide each side by a negative 2. That tells me that y value will be a negative 9. The ordered pair for problem number 10 then would be a negative 1 and a negative 9. Now next we want to go ahead and check our answer. Equation for number 9, number 10, I have a negative 2. X is a negative 1. I have subtract 2. And then I'm putting a negative 9 in. Remember to use parentheses when you're substituting a variable into your calculator. And I get 20. That one works. So now let's check the next one. I will have a negative 1 for the x. And I have subtract 2y. And y is negative 9. And I should have 17. So negative 1 minus 2 times a negative 9, 2 times negative 9 should give me 17, and it does check out. Just take these videos for notes and make sure you keep track of them.